Hello and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be looking at the long-awaited collab, Code Geass. By now, you have probably heard of Gino, but there are a few other units and equips that stand out and deserve a quick glance. Maybe they're not as groundbreaking as Gino, but are still good nonetheless. I do think it's a good idea to pull in this REM, as no other event in the near future has as much value as this 7-stone machine. These units will also be added to the video egg machine, so don't forget to do your 4 daily @REM pulls. The chances of getting these units is minuscule, but you could be one of the lucky few. Before looking at the REM units, let me look at the free ones. I don't see much value in Shirley or Lelouch C.C. Shirley has some utility, but the active skill is very underwhelming. Lelouch C.C. is a weaker copy of the REM version of Lelouch and C2. They have the same active skill, but way weaker awakenings and stats. It seems this will be a trend going forward, with the batch unit getting a knockoff version that you can get as a dungeon clear reward, but only 1 copy max. And just like Shirley, this unit is very underwhelming, but free is free, so at least get the 1 copy of each. Charles and Marianne is the descended unit you need to fully skill up and max level to unlock the Xingke awakening of the transforming Code Geass units. Make sure to at least get 1 copy, since there will be no other way to unlock that awakening until the next Code Geass rerun, if that even happens. Alright, now onto the REM units. Kaguya is an auto-heal loop, but unfortunately, she heals 35% HP instead of the usual 40%, so if you have no other ways of healing, she probably won't be enough for endgame dungeons. At the very least, she could help recover SS, but she only has a single attribute and 1 double L. It's hard to compete with Free, so if you have Ren, who also soars board shrinks, you might not have much use for Kaguya unless you need her blue attribute. Sayoko is a T-centric unit that generates 6 fire and heal orbs, but gives you a pesky cloud. She is able to deal okay damage, especially with her self buff, but a lot of the top fire elites like Kallen, Pastel, and Shanna already take care of orb generation, so including Sayoko in a team doesn't offer much value. Her equip is decent if fire Ts ever catch on, but by then, we'll probably have better equips. Guildford suffers from being a piercer, as these active skills aren't in high demand, especially for fire teams, since they tend to use BDPs to pierce damage shields. If you want to go for a T-centric fire team, then he's not a bad option to get 2 turns to pierce on a short fortune cooldown without any drawbacks. There are other fire T units in this collab, but only Kallen stuck around in JP, and she could focus on Ts, but for most teams that I've seen, people run a BDP equip on her and go without using a piercer sub. His equip is somewhat similar to Sayoko's, but doesn't have as many effective skill boosts, and again, doesn't really have that many applications at the moment. Millie has a lot of team HP awakenings, but no damage awakenings at all. Her active skill also makes everyone else do no damage to get a full board change and enhancement. I don't think there are any teams that would want this board though. For light teams, Yuha and Angie would come to mind, but they already generate enough orbs. For fire, there's Shanna and Kallen, and again, they take care of orb generation. If you don't have anything better, then I doubt Millie will be enough. If you squint hard enough, her equip is a replacement for Zenitsu's equip. It's missing 2 effective skill boosts though, so not nearly as good, but it's one of the better replacements if you value that 1 team HP. This collab has a bunch of wood leaders, subs, and equips, but most of these are pretty underwhelming. Luciano can deal some damage, but again, wood teams are pretty weak at the moment. He has a pierce active skill that also breaks a shield, but he doesn't stand out at all, unless you really want to try to make a wood team. Monica deals about the same damage as Luciano, and she generates wood and light orbs. You could make a system with 2 of her, but she doesn't raise her damage cap all that high, so she'll struggle to deal damage to fire or high defense enemies. She has a slightly better leader skill and equip than Luciano, but both equips green sub-attribute awakenings might be a deal breaker for some teams. B2 is a better orb generator and leader than Monica, but has about the same damage potential. At least his damage cap break is slightly higher, but it's honestly not enough to carry this wood unit. He usually pairs with C2 or Beldora from Slime, but honestly, these teams seem to struggle dealing out damage. They can still clear some of the endgame dungeons, but it seems like an uphill battle. Some of these teams have an easy time hitting over 14 combos, so once we get the 7C awakening buffs, these teams will get a boost. That pretty much goes for almost every unit in this collab though, so it's not like B2 will come out ahead. For what it's worth, B2 is one of the top rated wood leaders in JP. Just like with Monica, B2's equip is solid if you don't mind the wood sub-attribute. And also like Sayoko's equip, it might not be that bad on a strong wood unit for a T-centric team, but again, this will probably be power creep by then, if that ever happens. Lloyd and Cecile are a decent rebuffer, but also suffer from being green attribute. This mainly hinders their assist recovery potential since they only have 1 attribute. At the very least, they have an amazing 3 HP and 10C equip, as long as you don't mind the green sub-attribute awakening and low cooldown. Since the equip disappears after being used, it's better used on a transforming unit or anyone with a high cooldown Evo active skill so as to never overcharge. Roze and Ash is an exchangeable duo unit, but I really would think twice about exchanging for them as I don't see their value at the moment. They have a cycling 3 cooldown to 1 cooldown Evo skill, so you could create a system with 2, but this is impractical since 1 copy in a team would be more than enough. They are basically a piercer that could also help with multiple debuffs and damage absorption at times, so they are the closest thing NA has to the marbles. For light T teams specifically, you'd rather use someone like Ultraman Arc, who deals way more damage. If you were unable to get Arc and roll or bought a Suzaku, then maybe Roze and Ash could be an okay trade, as this unit is the next best piercer and damage absorb voider for light teams at the moment. If you wait 2 months, you'll be able to exchange for Dorna, who is exchangeable for 6-star GFEs, so honestly a much better and cheaper trade, but again, you'd have to wait 2 months. Roze and Ash's equip is good to turn any known machine unit with a high damage multiplier into a great Gino sub. One example is the future Ordeal Ra, who also benefits from the Guardbreak Awakening, but there are other alternatives out there and you might not even need to turn Ra into a machine. So overall, this unit is a low priority trade, especially if you have Arc or Daranti. Jeremiah is a decent full cleric that could deal damage in a green L team, but those are not a thing at all at the moment. Like all other clerics, it's hard to compete with Kohaku and Selkia in the near future since they boost HP, among other things. If you got HP buffs covered with other units, then Jeremiah might be an okay cleric if you have nothing else. His equip is a bit decent, as there will be only 6 equips with 10C, 1 skill boost, and 1 team HP with Dark Burst's arrival. Jeremiah's equip lacks the effective skill boost of those other ones, and again, the green sub-attribute Awakening might be a big downside. Villetta is a full cleric on a 5-turn cooldown, so she's not that bad for dark teams since she can help recover up to 4 turns of assist removal with 1L. Her active skill also tackles RCB debuffs indirectly and targeted attack reductions. She also has respectable healing potential, and with the enhanced stats Awakening, she can have a decent HP stat. The Super Fuga Super Awakening has niche applications, since most of the time, people who run these fit them in with equips. Villetta's equip is similar to Shion's from Slime. It has the same unattractive active skill, but the Awakenings can help patch holes in some teams while providing bulk. Overall, she's a pretty decent dark cleric. Like with Lelouch C.C, Schneizl's Orb Generation active skill is unreliable to guarantee enough Dark Orbs to deal damage. You only need to match Dark and Light to activate your damage reduction, which will be easy in 7x6 boards. If his active skill were on a 3-turn cooldown, then I think he'd be usable as a system. However, even if the active skill cooldown were lower, there really isn't a team that wants this unit. When I think of light and dark teams, I instinctively think of Kaishu and Setsuki and Kanat, but those didn't really catch on and are TPA based with Pierce active skills, whereas Schneizel would rather match boxes. He could just be a sub or a one-off unit to serve as a board expander and to help deal a lot of damage for a turn, but that's an extremely niche situation. His limited equip can be used to turn a 1-turn cooldown active skill unit into a looping shield. I don't know about you, but I have yet to do that. The only unit I would use this on would be probably Gon, since he lacks a Levitate Awakening and has a decent damage multiplier, but you'll have to transform him twice and have to match green BDPs for damage. I wouldn't exchange for this unit. If you have the fodder, it never really hurts to get one just in case, but otherwise, I'd rather save my fodder for the other Code Geass units. Cornelia is kinda similar to Geld, but exchanges his 2-turn shield for a higher damage cap and a self-attack boost. Cornelia's Awakenings also give her a higher damage multiplier, but leave her bindable. Active skills with only a damage absorption void effect are always a bit awkward to use, so she might not exactly fit in a team, even though she's a decent damage dealer in dark BDP teams. Her equip reminds me of other equips with the Dark Sub-attribute, 7C, and Skill Boost Awakenings, but Cornelia drops the team HP for a haste active skill. So if you can afford to lose the bulk, then this equip might be more valuable. Ohgi is a 7x6 base unit with the Lupin Roulette and Time Buff active skill. His active skill also gives a 60% shield on a lowish cooldown, and because of this, he is often used in SN3 teams since there are a couple of large heads scattered throughout the dungeon. He does struggle to deal damage, but at least he has 6 skill boosts and up to 3 full resists. Xingke is a low cooldown shield breaker, but his other active skill effects don't make him valuable enough to include in a team. Apart from his shield break effect, his active skill also gives a 2-turn roulette on a 4-turn cooldown, so it can be useful to counter problematic roulettes. You could create a system with 2 Xingkes, but I don't see the benefit of running 2 of him, since teams that usually want the looping roulette, i.e. rainbow teams, will probably be better off using a unit with a looping spinner and time buff active skill. He can do damage in a rainbow team with his Garbreak Super Awakening, or in a blue team with the T Super Awakening. So he is flexible in that sense, but the latter teams aren't a thing at the moment, so at best, he's a niche sub. Xingke's equip is fairly decent, as he has a good mix of utility and damage awakenings, but lacks any effective skill boost. This equip was pretty important in JP's fastest SN3 team, as it is a shield breaker on a low cooldown, but if NA doesn't get the other Marvel units and equips in this team, then the potential usage of this equip diminishes a bit. Nunnally is an auto healer like Rin and Index. Her active skill doesn't tackle board shrinks or help recover as many turns of assist removal like Ren, but her main selling point is her potentially higher stats. She is the auto healer of choice for the SN3 Suzaku and Misaka team, so if you have 2 or more Misakas and roll or buy Suzaku, Nunnally will be another unit you'll want to get. Her equip is okay, but it doesn't stand out as there are plenty of 3 team HP equips out there. There are 3 of those in this collab alone. Rolo is a pretty decent looping shield that brings a lot of skill boost to the table. He additionally has a 1-turn delay at the cost of cutting your HP in half. He's kinda similar to Index and Toma, where both cards are 7x6 bases, but Rolo's active skill does not evolve. He does decent damage in light T teams with his T Super Awakening, so he's not a bad option for Pat Island Pastel and Suzaku teams specifically if you don't have 2 Ultramen and Ultra 7s. His equip is pretty decent as well. It's the second 10C and light sub-attribute equip in NA. Not as good as Hakuro's due to the effective skill boost, but still really good, especially on a bindable unit like Rolo himself. Base Lelouch has absolutely no skill boost, but with 3 copies, you could have 100% uptime on a 60% shield. Along with his 5.2 effective HP leader skill, you would be pretty much unkillable, that is, until his active skill gives you fewer than 6 Dark Orbs, leaving you unable to activate your leader skill damage reduction, which is a significant risk on 5x6 boards. A 4 Lelouch team usually runs Shuna as a 7x6 space and cleric and either Anya or Cornelia to leader swap. Eventually, when we get Arc Berza, they can also be a leader, but all of these teams require a lot of investment in Lelouch copies. Maybe you will be able to roll all the necessary dupes, but you'll want a lot of equips with 2 or more skill boosts and a Dark Sub-Attribute Awakening. Milim's equip is the ideal choice, since it also has a 10C that Lelouch needs to do significant damage on his second and third attributes. Milim herself is a unit you could use to fill in any system gaps, since she also gives you orbs on a 4-turn cooldown. But if you have all of these Milim copies, I would just run a Milim team. Lelouch teams also struggle to have a large enough FUA for SN2 and SN3, so you will also need to fit in an equip or 2 with the FUA or Super FUA Awakening. Another option is to pair with Bismarck, since he has a 10 million FUA leader skill. Unfortunately, Bismarck's active skill doesn't bring much to the table since you have so many orb generators already. Lelouch's equip would work okay on himself, but it unfortunately lacks damage awakenings, which he desperately needs in newer in-game dungeons. So overall, I don't really think a Lelouch system is worth the investment. Anya is a great Omni Voider that also destroys a shield. This is one of the better shield breakers out there since she also plays an important role in a team. The better option is Evo Rimuru, since 1 turn of void absorption effects is not enough sometimes. An example is SN3, where you'll face an enemy that absorbs damage and has a super result, so you'll need at least 2 turns of damage absorption void. If 1 turn is enough and you want a dark unit, Anya is a great option that can do solid damage with BDPs. Her equip is great on herself since it solves her bindable issue and changes her sub-attribute to dark, but the equip's active skill doesn't do much at the start of a dungeon. Some people pair her up with Lelouch and Z2 since their low cooldown active skill allows her to later swap with a 7x6 base and gives 15 seconds of move time to match those random dark, wood, and heal boards. I am not a fan of the low effective HP that these teams have though, but overall, Anya is a very decent unit whose equip is the only one with the Dark Sub-Attribute, Unbindable, and Box Awakenings. Lelouch and C2 is the badge unit, so it's purchasable for $30, or exchangeable for 14 Code Geass units, which amounts to 98 stones. Dark has been getting a lot of support lately, especially with orb changes like Milim and Accelerator, so if you have one of those other units, I don't know if I'd go for this unit. If you decide to go for this duo unit, the first stage of their Evo skill offers 5 effective skill boosts and then becomes a whole board changer. You could create a system with 3 copies, but the resulting board might not produce enough Dark Orbs to make a box. Activating your leader skill damage reduction might be easy, but depending on the orb distribution, you might have a hard time dealing damage or healing enough considering they drop you to 1 HP every time. The active skill buffs are nice, but depending on how high the enemy defense is, the 5 billion damage cap might not be enough. This system is not really worth the investment, and one copy doesn't have much value, even for the badge, since there aren't that many full or close to full Code Geass teams that would actually want it. The equip is designed for the 6 effective skill boosts and other awakenings, but if you didn't end up with a ton of fodder after chasing Gino, Suzaku, or Kallen, I wouldn't bother exchanging. Even though Todoh can deal decent damage, he will only be used in very niche situations. Due to his high cooldown active skill, he's great for buttoning an enemy out of existence, but there aren't that many places where it's worthwhile to do that. ASR1 is an example, but maybe you already have Hinata's equip from Slime, who does the same job, but slower since Todoh is only 2 hits. His equip is great for dark units, not quite as good as Goten's, but definitely up there when it comes to dark equips. If you end up making exchanges for other Code Geass units, I would try to keep every single copy of Todoh that you manage to get. Bismarck is a decent dark leader, as his leader skill gives 10 million FUA and bonus combos. His leader skill activation is easy with a system of 2 copies, but you might not have enough orbs to match a ADP and deal damage. We'll soon get Arc Burza, who's a 1-turn cooldown dark orb spawner that will help produce more consistent boards. So Bismarck teams will get stronger very soon. One of his best pairings is Arc Burza as well, since they have a high effective HP and give 4 bonus combos. But this pairing suffers from having lower HP. The best pairing that gives an HP boost is Lelouch, and instead of running for Lelouch, you could just run 2 copies, with Bismarck closing the orb generation loop with his 2-turn active skill, but you still run the chance of generating fewer than 6 dark orbs half the time on the turns that you use Lelouch's active skill. Again, Dark has a lot of strong leaders already, and while Bismarck is strong, I don't think he's better than Milim or Accelerator, so he might not be that much of a game changer if you manage to assemble those teams. His equip is great on dark units, and will be even more so after the 7C Awakening buff, especially for teams that consistently hit 14 or more combos. It is unfortunate that the active skill doesn't give any effective skill boost, but at the moment, very few 7C Plus and Team HP equips do that, and there will be none in NA with the Dark Sub-Attribute Awakening if we don't get the Marvel buffs. C2 is a very useful absorption voider that can also handle assist removal recovery, but it's very unfortunate that she's a green unit. At least she has a dark sub-attribute. The active skill is extremely useful because it also tackles HP debuffs, and if you missed out on Kohaku, this might be the next best unit to tackle those debuffs until Selklia arrives. Gonho seems to be releasing more of these units to counter this debuff. A handful of the new Sanrio units released in JP give HP buffs, and a few of these are exchangeable like C2. The closest competitor to C2 from the Sanrio collab is Oria Pochako, who also tackles damage and attribute absorption shields, but this unit is locked to fire teams if you want them to help recover assist. Oria Pochako is also a BGM unit, so they're not as accessible as C2. To take on the various big hits in SN3 without slowing down, you could run both C2 and Kohaku or Selklia to use their HP buffs to take them on. As an example, floor 7 has an unavoidable huge hit, and then floor 8 might require a cleric, so you could use C2's HP buff to tank floor 7 and then Kohaku for floor 8. Otherwise, without C2, you would use Kohaku floor 7 and then stall until she's ready again for floor 8. This is just one example, but having 2 units with HP buffs and other useful active skill effects in a team can let you move faster through dungeons. Her equip is alright, but definitely loses some points due to the wood sub-attribute awakening. C2 is definitely the first unit I would consider exchanging for if you don't manage to roll her, but I would only get 1 copy at most, since again, I don't see much value in her equip. Euphemia is a damage-focused cleric that also has a decent amount of utility with her healing potential and double Ls. She is commonly paired with Kallen, who needs the leader skill HP boost, but Euphy can definitely work as a cleric in any team that uses fire or light orbs. The cap rate for leader and helper is nice, but nowadays, all the good leaders already handle that. Only very few leaders would benefit from Euphy's active skill. Even for those select few, you always have to be careful timing your cleric active skill, so you can't consistently rely on the cap break effect. The equip is less impressive. If it only had a damage awakening, then it could be useful. A box awakening for fire teams would have been ideal, so for that reason, I only think 1 copy of Euphy is enough, but only if you have concrete plans for her. If you're getting a Kallen, or if you already have some Chanas or Fiatrax, then maybe exchange for her if you didn't manage to get her. If you have enough fodder, it's not a bad idea to get more clerics, so maybe pick her up regardless. All of the exchangeable 8-star Code Geass units can also take 7-star GFVs as straight fodder, but I would be careful exchanging too many of these since Monster Hunter also take them as fodder. I'll talk about more of these future exchanges later in the video. Kallen is one of the best fire leads at the moment in JP, and again, she pairs nicely with Yuffie in a fire BDP or T team. These teams are easy to assemble if you already have two Shannas or Fiajax, but to optimize them, you'll want your own Kallen, otherwise you'll miss out on being able to cap break both herself and Yuffie. Her active skill handles board shrinks on a 1-turn cooldown, so that's a mechanic you won't have to worry about. Fiajax and Shanna don't generate enough orbs for a BDP, so it's great that Kallen's active skill also generates 4 fire orbs. Kallen and Fiajax together only generate 8 fire orbs total, so it is possible to end up not having 9 fire orbs, but at least Kallen and Yuffie have T awakenings as well to deal a good amount of damage. It does seem like most people ignore the T awakening and instead use BDP equips on Kallen and her subs to deal piercing damage and forgo bringing a piercer sub. A unit like Anya could be a great sub if you would rather focus on Ts, since she handles void and absorption shields. But like always, one turn of these effects might not be enough. Regardless of which playstyle you focus on, Kallen has an easy to activate leader skill that only requires a fire and heal match. Her equip is great on herself and on most of her popular subs like Fiajax, who don't have a box awakening and have a non-fire second attribute. So the more copies of Kallen you get, the better. There are a bunch of equips out there with a red sub attribute and box awakenings. Obviously these are not as good as Kallen's, but you might already have the tools needed to make a pretty strong fire team. You could just buy Kallen, exchange for Yuffie, and forget about the rest of the REM if you don't care about light, dark, or rainbow teams. Suzaku is the BGM unit and the best light unit at the moment in JP. He does a ridiculous amount of damage in light T or cross teams. He even caps in Miseka teams without matching any of those shapes. The SN3 Miseka team is pretty expensive since it requires a bunch of BGMs, and the other teams Suzaku's used on are not much different. Other usual subs or pairings include Ultraman Arc, who's an Orb skin, Ultraman and Ultraman 7, who are BGMs, Celclea, who will be a BGM unit, and Pad Island Pastel, who will be an Orb skin in a seasonal REM. Even if you have none of these units, he will probably remain a strong sub in future light teams due to his damage output and ability to generate 5 light orbs on a 1-turn cooldown. His later skill is amazing since he gives bonus combos and a 10 million follow-up attack, which is needed for SN2 and SN3. In addition, he also gives a small but important HP buff to light units to deal with raw HP checks. He's a great light leader as long as you're matching 5 or more light orbs and hitting at least 10 combos. His first equip is outstanding for any light unit because he grants some bulk, damage, and 6 effective skill boosts. And again, these 7 C+ equips will get buffed soon enough. His second equip is decent, but doesn't have as many applications as the first one since you'll only want this on a light unit in a T-centric team. You'll want to have this on a light transforming unit with a non-light second attribute such as himself or Pad Island Pastel as to not overcharge since the equip has a low cooldown active skill which doesn't provide much at the start of a dungeon. Gino is the biggest highlight from this collab. You have probably heard of him already and how JP Tierlist created a whole separate tier just for him. But what makes him so great? Pretty much everything about his kit. He pumps out a ridiculous amount of damage, as his active skill gives a self-attack boost and lets him do up to 30 billion damage. The cap break effect loops, and with 2 copies of him, you'll always have a rainbow board. On top of that, he also handles any possible board size changes. His leader skill gives a good mix of damage reduction and boosts HP and recovery for machine types. In addition, the leader skill gives a good amount of bonus combos, and a Gino team reaches 10 million FUA, which again is very important for the newer in-game dungeons. I guess the only downside is the machine type restriction, but he's so broken in fact that some team comps don't bother turning every sub into machine type. Maybe that will be needed for future dungeons, but for now, he's more than capable without a full machine team. Gino teams have a lot of flexibility, and your subs don't even have to deal damage since he does enough by his lonesome, as observed in this free-to-play clear of SN3. Some of his common subs include Labrel, or the All Raw, and Celclea. We don't have the latter two yet, but these subs handle anything you throw at them. The last sub could be anyone able to deal with attribute and damage absorption shields. It's not surprising that for the fastest SN3 clear in JP, Gino came out on top, even though rainbow teams are generally slower since you have to match 5 different attributes. Obviously, mapping and matching speed are important for that feat, but it's still a bit surprising that this rainbow team won. I have a playlist of JP teams linked in the description if you want to get some inspiration. But for Gino teams, as long as you're able to transform turn 1 and cover the most common mechanics, you'll be able to steamroll pretty much every dungeon in the game. I do wonder how the inevitable power creep will try to topple Gino. I guess one way would be to have 3 or more skill delay turns throughout dungeons to prevent Gino from running the Pierce Latent, but then again, you could just sub in someone with the Pierce active skill. We can only wait and see what SN4 will have in store for us in the next few months. But until then, Gino is the undisputed strongest leader in the game. His equip is great on rainbow units. This is the only 5 color and 3 skill plus awakening in the game, and the only other equip that comes somewhat close awakening wise is Millim's, since a 5 color match awakening gives the same damage boost as a 10C awakening. But 10C awakenings are not as restrictive as most other meta teams, rainbow or not, hit at least 10C consistently. Also, Gino's equip has a much better active skill than Millim's. Unless you really hate rainbow teams, Gino is definitely a unit you'll want to get a hold of. 1 copy might be enough, since I'm sure there will be no shortage of Gino helpers, but these might be running leader resist latents, so like it's often the case, you might want to get another copy of Gino to self-pair. Some teams run 3 Genos total, but honestly that sounds like overkill. I think 3 copies is the magic number for me, 2 to use as a leader and helper, and the third to switch between sub or equip. But honestly, 2 copies might be more than enough if you have a friend or an alt account that can put up a Gino with your desired latents and equip setup. Gino is a mid rarity, so you will be subjected to the mercy of randomness since there's no sure way to get him like a bundle or an exchange. At 3.8%, he's not as difficult to get as some BGMs, but you could still get extremely unlucky. At the very least, even if Gino is your primary focus, you might be able to pick up other strong leaders like Suzaku and Kallen, or units with a lot of utility, strong equips, or niche applications. I do think this REM has the most value for the foreseeable future. Other future collabs and REMs include Pat Island, Monster Hunter, Sanrio, Halloween, and whatever collab, if any, Gonho will announce on stream this Saturday. Pat Island doesn't have much of note except maybe Pastel to run with Suzaku. I don't see as much pull value from Monster Hunter and Sanrio as I do for Code Geass. Those other collabs do have interesting units, but most of the ones that catch my eye are exchangeable. For Monster Hunter, there's Namiel who you need 4 of to build a farming system, but ideally you want a few more extra copies since their own equip is best in slot for them. I might be missing something, but honestly I don't see much of the appeal for this unit as it seems that those teams are not that flexible and don't really farm any new dungeons that other farming teams like Norris, Noah, and Geass aren't already able to tackle. Of course, Namiel clears dungeons significantly faster than most of these other teams, but that alone doesn't make this exchange all that appealing to me. There's also Nergigante and Fatalis, who like Namiel are exchangeable for 7-star GFEs and 6-star and above Monster Hunter units. These older units actually open up new farming horizons in UN6 and SN2, so I do see more value exchanging for these 2 units if you don't already have them. Sanrio also seems to have some worthwhile exchanges, but I haven't taken a close look. Some of the new exchanges only take 6-star and above Sanrio units, while others can take 6-star GFEs. Some of the Code Geass exchangeables take 7-star GFEs as fodder, so I guess be aware of which 7-star GFEs you'll want to save up for future Monster Hunter exchanges. Not sure what's in store for Halloween yet, but like with Pat Island, some of the older exchangeable units also take 7-star GFEs as fodder. And who knows if the announced JP collab this Saturday will have any worthwhile exchanges. If they do, I think it's a safe bet that those will also take in 7-star GFEs. We might see some details at the tail end of our Code Geass run after the Sanrio collab is over in JP, so if you like to plan things ahead, it might not hurt to wait a few days before pulling Code Geass. At some point you have to decide on which event has the most value for you, and for me at the moment, that goes to Code Geass since I want to try my luck with Gino, Suzaku, Kallen, and all of the other units with niche applications like Nunnally and Todoh, or strong equips like Bismarck's and Xingke's. Unfortunately, we should also be seeing the Patsy Super Gadfest sometime very soon, but I'm pulling the trigger on Code Geass. Let me know if you think there is something more exciting down the line. I haven't taken that much of a close look at Monster Hunter on Sanrio yet, but maybe I overlooked an amazing unit or equip. Alright, that does it for this video. I'll see you guys next time, and please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Goodbye!